Hi, this is the number 9 in developing story ideas for screen narratives, and we're still sticking with stories. And in this particular instance, two story types. Remembering again that this is all about an individual character's motivation, and they may have more than one story running with them in any particular narrative, or over a series of narratives if we're talking TV and web series, etc. So in the first instance, let's look at a classic, one that's been around for a long time, The Debt That Must Be Repaid. Now, this is, of course, goes back to all notions of Faustian pacts, etc. But don't take this as in the simple issue about people feeling guilty over something they've done or actually trying to bribe someone to get something. Though there are many characters that obviously do this within narratives. Debt must be repaid story can also be a debt that you've inherited from somewhere, or an action that you decide needs to be undertaken to free you of a burden. And there are classic examples of this in the recent past, include the girl in Winter's Bone, who has to try and repay the debt or prove that her brother's dead in order for her to keep the family home. And she goes through a lot to actually repay that debt and lift that burden off the family. But it's also in much lighter pieces of work, like Buzz Lightyear's debt in Toy Story 2, or in more fantastical pieces such as Angel's debt to be repaid in the series Buffy. So let's look at how you construct this story and how you put the pieces together so that the audience can follow that character's debt and how it is actually being repaid. In the first instance, there is obviously something that somebody wants. Now this may be set up very simply as a straightforward desire, may look like a simple quest, but it moves into a different direction almost immediately, where someone or something is available that will provide that want or solve that problem, but at a price. The person then agrees to undertake that price. And they then go off on their journey, their story, actually to try and get what they want, but at the price they've agreed. At some point, they try to avoid paying that price. This is often a point where the character basically tries to slip out of the control of the person who the debt is owed to, or literally escape from where they are. However, inevitably, the person who's owed the debt, or the form of the debt, comes to haunt them again, and they at that point must confront the fact that the debt must be paid. Now this may in fact be solved by external forces, but more often than not, the character themselves has to make a choice, and the debt is either paid or expunged in some way, shape or form, and the story is therefore complete. Now this type of story works very well for characters when you're working in ensemble groups and you want to pick someone out from the whole being, or in fact for a character secondary storyline in a basic quest where actually it's not revealed until quite late on in the narrative that one of the main story motivations for your central character is in fact there's a debt outstanding that's not been revealed necessarily to the audience or the other characters until quite a way into the narrative. And again, this highlights one of the multiple uses of stories. That once you've got a narrative in which you're building up various stories, one or two of them can be hidden and their elements revealed later on in the plot so that you have serious narrative surprises available to you based on the fact that this particular storyline was being hidden from the audience, though obviously not from the character. Now this brings us to the next and the second of the story outlines, story ideas, story motivations that is available to us in this set of stories. And this is the spider and the fly. Now this is your classic antagonist's motivation. They set out to achieve something and plan to trap someone to do it. And therefore, in this sense, this motivational story works fantastically well when the antagonist is laying down a plot that the protagonist basically has to follow. Works extremely well in conspiracy thrillers and obviously in various sort of horror movies where the monster or the villain, the ghost in this instance perhaps, is actually always one step ahead of the protagonist in drawing them towards the deed that they need them to do. However, it also works well in dramas, as has been demonstrated in various stage plays over the years, some of the classics being Othello and so on, but also in more domestic scenarios, where you have characters in families who are manipulating everyone else to their ends, the bedrock of many a TV soap opera. So, how does this story work, and how can you use it? Well, first off, you need to set up that the character actually wants another character to do their bidding. It is not a simple desire in that sense. It is about manipulation, and we need to establish that the character seeks to manipulate others to their end at the very beginning of the story. The character then develops a plan to get those characters to do it, or the character to do it. They then set that plan in motion, and they achieve their initial goal. However, there's always an aftermath. And this is the interesting point about the spider and the fly storyline. Having achieved their goal, normally there is a point at which a denouement follows from this. And it's critical from the story's point of view that we understand that what the spider has actually achieved in their plan and what the outcome of that plan actually is, which may not be, of course, the thing they desire. As is in the case of many antagonists, they are actually destroyed or even killed. And the protagonist triumphant, when in fact they were meant to be the spider in the whole thing. But there are times when the spider really does win out. The classic being the conspiracy thriller Seven, where the multiple killer actually engineers a plot where ultimately they win on all counts, and the young detective ends up being locked away for having killed him. However, the older detective, of course, brings wise ahead to this scenario, but then again, he wasn't the fly, the young detective was. So in this context, the spider is very, very powerful and extremely useful when you're developing thrillers and horror movies. You understand that the antagonist has a plan, and at some point the audience needs to get this plan in order to understand their motivation. However, that's enough of these two story types for now.